You should know what to record. Hi everyone, I'm Spencer Powers. Welcome to the Bitcoin Club, and happy to have Professor Shah give us his speech about the work he's done over the past year and the paper that was published last year. Just before we get started, just out of interest, it would be good for us to know what courses everyone's from, so we don't need to go one by one, but who here is from Sloan? And then course 6. And so, anyone else? Okay, great. So that's what we kind of figured. So welcome to the Bitcoin Club meeting. And after Professor Shah's presentation, if you want to stick around, we'll have kind of an informal introduction to the MIT Bitcoin Club and kind of get to know more about you, and you can learn more about the Bitcoin Club. But I'll give it off to Professor Shah. Thanks so much for joining.
Thanks for having me. So thanks a lot for all of you showing up at 6 p.m., especially on such a nice day. It means a lot. So before we get started, let me tell you that this talk, or this work is as much about Bitcoin as it could have been about any other financial instrument. The reason we chose Bitcoin is, and I'll explain to you in a second, was a very good reason. Okay, I'll give you my reason. What this talk is about is trying to understand that if we have a very simple Bayesian regression method, it's like the nearest neighbor-like method. It's a weighted version. And if you have this simple method, can you use it and sort of get some signal out from a data which is time series data coming from prices? And the reason we chose Bitcoin or Bitcoin prices is A, first of all, it's publicly available, so we could sort of get all the information that we wanted. 2, it has reasonable volume, and there are enough people, if you observe sort of how the trades are happening, there's a reasonable sort of amount of automated trading happening. So whatever signal is out there, first order of signal is gone. So really, sort of, if your algorithm can do well in terms of predicting prices, for example, there's some value to that. Okay. And the third is, in some sense, it's an isolated. Unlike sort of standard, let's say, NYSE, where I've got a bunch of other options, so I can sort of do a portfolio, here I've got only one thing to invest in. So that gave us sort of a perfect environment to sort of understand sort of this, how simple methods can, whether they have any value in terms of extracting signal out. Right, so with that in mind, this is a work with my former student Kang Zhang, who is now in New York for obvious reasons. So this is a slide I usually have in case sort of people don't know about Bitcoin. I'm sure all of you know. In case you don't know, there was a sort of individual in Alias who started this currency. It's unregulated. So the thing I like about, or not like about unregulated section is the following. I come from India, and in Indian setting there we have reasonably corrupt politicians. Now, here's what happens. There's one law that sort of is a beautiful law. It says something like this: that if you are an individual, and if I view you as in sort of a system with amount of income input that I've seen over years, and then sort of the amount of ownership that you have, which adds up a lot more than what your input is, then there's something wrong, and then now I can sort of hold you for unaccountability. If you, in principle, you could sort of use Bitcoin to sort of get away from that. Unfortunately, a lady, a politician in southern part of India, did not know Bitcoins, so she got caught recently, which was great. And there was an amusement. What we were interested in is, given sort of a reasonable transaction volume and given reasonable market depth, and given that sort of there are enough people, as you can notice from the transaction data, people are doing, trying to make money out of it. The market is not is reasonably efficient at some level. So the question is sort of, can you in this efficient market still extract signal out? Can you predict price? And if so, can you make profitable strategy out of it? Okay, so that's what I'm going to explain in the next few slides. So here's what we did. We collected data from OKCoin from Feb 2014 to July 2014, roughly 5 months. It's the price of Bitcoin, but also it's the order book, as many of you would know. What's the order book? Just to remind ourselves, in any such exchange, well, you go and you say, I want to buy a coin at $227, but somebody has to sell it at 227 or lower, only then your order can be fulfilled. Similarly, if you go and want to sell something at $229, you need somebody ready to buy at that price or higher, right? Usually in equilibrium setting, there are people who want to sell at a price and there are people who want to buy at a price, and they're sitting there waiting for their demands to be met. And that's why you got price for ask and price for bid. And these are the sort of things that sort of on this exchange are publicly available, unlike standard setting. So you get all this rich amount of information. Over that time, roughly, one way to count it is how many data points I have. Roughly 200 million raw data points, so it's a moderate size, nothing too gigantic. And we converted this thing into a time series. So each one is a time series because the price is a time series, and then I've got 60 prices and associated volumes of time series. So we've got some high dimensional time series data, clocked at 10 seconds to keep it simple. And now we've got this data, and the question is what I want to do is I want to predict price at each point of time and use that prediction to decide whether I can sort of hold my, I can invest into them so that I can sort of make profit. Now, again, my interest was primarily to understand, I've got a simple method. It has been successful in other scenarios. I believe in the method. The question is, can it extract signal out of in this setting? And so I did not want to have a fancy investment strategy. It's just an extremely simple investment strategy that can sort of see if signal comes out. Because here's a very, very simple thing. Every time I'm going to maintain a position which is +1, 0, or -1. So either I own a Bitcoin or I short it or nothing. Okay. Right. Now, how do I sort of change over time? Well, each time instance, I will do the following. I have I'm in some state, +1, 0, or -1. I'll see sort of what is the sort of change in the price in the next 10 seconds. I'll predict it and I'll explain how I will do it. And then based on that, I will decide whether to change my position or not. In particular, if the change is going to be reasonably large enough, then and my position is less than or equal to 0, is I'm nothing or I'm shorting something, I'm going to buy something. Because I know that if I buy and if indeed my prediction is true, after that I can sell it and I can make profit out of that. Similarly, if it's minus should be there. If less than minus threshold, then I will, and my current position is greater than or equal to 0, then I will sell. Otherwise I'll do nothing. Questions about strategy? Yeah.
Why not vary the amount of Bitcoin?
Absolutely, you can do that. I'm not going to do that because my interest is primarily to understand, am I predicting my price as well? And I don't want to sort of confuse it with the gain that I can get because of my clever strategies. If I want sort of as dumb a strategy as possible, but I want something, so I need to vary myself by a little bit. This is the minimal amount of little bit I need. And after that, I will let the prices dictate whether I can make money. Now the second question, which is a subtle one that you would ask is, well, if I can make money with this, what if I started scaling? Will it grow linearly? Answer should be no, because if it has to grow linearly, that means that I need sort of reasonably fat order books. Otherwise, how would I execute mine? So it shouldn't happen that way. Now, of course, then you can ask more interesting question. Can I further refine it by balancing the amount of things I do and so on and so forth? Yes, you can do that, but again, my interest here was, can I get the first order of information prediction? As you can see, as sort of my talk is progressing, there's very little about Bitcoin. So in case you came to sort of figure out how to sort of crunch Bitcoins, pardon me for wasting your 6 p.m. lovely time, but hopefully that's not the case. In any case, there's a question. Yeah.
How does the spread between bid and ask will compare with the threshold you set up there?
Sorry, do that again?
Like, what's the difference between the bid and ask, the spread, compared with the threshold that you have?
Yeah, so threshold was predetermined. It did not sort of depend on the ratio of bid and ask. However, we did use the bid and ask information, as I was told you in a second, to determine what we would predict as a change in the price.
Right, I think my question is, if the spread between bid and ask is extremely large,
Yeah.
and the threshold is kind of constant,
Yeah.
how can you make sure you make money from this threshold?
Sure, so in some sense, it's a dumb strategy. I still wanted to see if I can predict. And it's like, so I'm trying to tie my hands as much as possible in terms of strategy. Usually my goal is to see if I can sort of actually predict this one. It's a good question. And of course, for that reason, as you're pointing out, I would actually use the information about sort of the differences between bid and ask to sort of determine my prediction. Right. Okay, so just sort of to whet your appetite, here is the summary of our offline simulation. What we did is that we took the entire period, which is from February to July, and till May, we used that as a training to train various parameters, including the threshold. And after it's fixed, from this point onwards, we ran the system causally, as instead of, we did not use any future information to decide what to do. And then so we ran the training study. Now I'm plotting two time series here. This is the time. There's one axis which is representing the price of Bitcoin, and that's a blue time series. And then sort of on this axis, I'm plotting the cumulative profit that we made at that point of time, and that's the black time series. And the summary is that this is the amount of profit we made for 50 days by average investment of this, and this was the return. So what to say is sort of there is this reasonable signal that we can extract out of the data. Yes, please.
So if you're really interested in your prediction power, shouldn't you be kind of compensating for the fact that Bitcoin went up in value during your investment period? If what we're really interested in is the prediction power, do we want to compensate for the fact that Bitcoin went up in value? That seems like that would be reflected in the return.
You mean so Bitcoin will have increased in value?
Yes.
Okay, so one way to do that is this, which is exactly the right thing. I mean, you want to be sort of more precise, and you would say, let me sort of find out the Sharpe ratio, and then the risk-free investment, which is what you're saying. Let me see, am I sort of making any profit over it, and then sort of normalize it for the sort of the variation. The standard formula, bottom line is that's a number, 4.1. Is that good, bad, ugly? Well, if you are in this business, maybe sort of Sharpe ratio of 4.1, depending on what type of investor you are, is not great, because maybe you want 9. But if you are sort of wondering about if, in case, looks like most of you are young, maybe you are not worried about your 401ks. In case you're worried about it, and if you are around places like MIT, you would use something like Fidelity, and then most of the Fidelity's options have Sharpe ratio around 2. So in that sense, this is reason. Yes, please.
What do you use for the risk-free rate, and what do you use for like the index to measure the ceilings?
So that's the,
Okay.
as you said, so am I complying with you through my? Okay, so the summary sort of, at least from my perspective, summary is that, well, looks like sort of this is a reasonable strategy and you are getting some signals. So the question is that how did we get a signal? Okay, that's the meat of it, right? So I'm going to sort of go through that unless anybody has a question. Okay, so it's basically a simple regression. Now, just to remind all of us, pardon me for here being too pedantic, but classically, the way one would think of regression is as follows, right? I've got a bunch of training data points, xi's and yi's. Okay, so y is the label that I want to predict, and x is something that's what I see. Okay. I've got xi, y is given to me, and what I want to do is for a given observation, I want to predict the associated label y using the history I have. And then sort of, there's a standard non-parametric approaches where you say, well, let me try to fit a function that sort of relates my observations to my labels, and maybe there's some noise. And from training data, I'm going to try to learn this function. One standard function is linear regression. And linear regression would say the function is a linear function of my observations. and is a simple way to solve it. This is one way to go about it. This type of approaches won't be useful, I guess, for our setting because type of data I'm interested in is X's are effectively my different segments of time series of different time period up to till current time. Let's say I'm at time 0. I'm going to predict what's going to happen in near future. I'm going to look at my recent past of varying length, and that's a sort of a high-dimensional time series data or multi-dimensional time series thing. I'm going to use that to predict what's going to be my future. Okay, now I have got a training data available because I've seen enough history about sort of how that time series varied and sort of how its future segment looked like. You can go back sort of, let's say, sort of at time -10, look at its history, and then look at sort of from -10, how did its future look like? That future was my label, and the history from that point was my axis. Okay, so I can sort of generate lots of such training data from my past, and I can sort of predict. The problem is that sort of this type of approaches won't work. There are more interesting time series models like ARMA models and so on that don't work well. And this simple approach works really well, where the idea is that, well, let's think of sort of X and Y as some kind of a joint distribution. And what I want to do is I want to compute, in some sense, conditional distribution of Y given X. I want to use empirical data as my proxy, and then based on that, I want to just predict conditional value of my label given my observation. Now, it's what's known as Bayesian regression. The problem with this is that, in general, this could be terrible because I'm trying to sort of predict, I'm trying to sort of learn joint distribution over extremely high, extremely complex space. So maybe I need some structure, and the basic idea of our structure was what we call a latent source model. Instead of going into the detail of this, let me not sort of say. Basic idea is this. Okay? These are different price variation segments over time. Okay? Some of them sort of led after this time, let's say, increase in price. Some of them led to decrease in price. Okay? So I can sort of divide my sort of time segments into sort of the X's and Y's. Now, one hypothesis behind the model that I did not describe is that, well, price changes happen somewhat in a seemingly unstructured way, but there are only few such ways in which things happen. Okay, it's like, analogously speaking, people shop only in a few different ways. People who are brand aware, people who are like, who don't care about what clothes they wear, such as me, and just go and shop whatever is the first thing that's available, and so on. Similarly, in this one, when price increases or decreases, interestingly, there are only a few different ways in which these things are happening. I don't know what those ways are. I don't need to know those ways are, because that's effectively the point of this method is. That is, if I were to predict what's going to happen in the near-term future, let me look at recent past. Let me compare it with all histories that I have. Okay? If that looks close to me, I will sort of give it high weight, otherwise I will give it low weight. And then whatever this history is, let me look at its future. And that sort of would give me sort of what my future is. Make sense? There are the three people here, and sort of, if they're all three of them are similar to me, I will take their labels and then sort of use them. But if two of them are similar and one is not, I will not take that person's label, but I'll take these two. Extremely simple. And that's it. And so one way to think of it is data is my model, that's historical data. And when I want to sort of compute what's going to happen in future, I'm going to look at my current segment, compare it with each of the historical segments, compute similarities, look at their future, weight them, aggregate them, and that will give me some predictive future. Okay. And that's basically it. And this is precisely how final prices were computed. The final price was a linear combination of different price predictions I will make using three different segments, and the R, where R is actually depends on this Fourier spread. Okay, and what are these different PIs, one for I equals to 1, 2, 3. They're based on 3 different time segments of the 3 different lengths. The 30-minute history, 60-minute history, and 120-minute history. And that's that. Alright, so I think I've described you everything I wanted to tell you. Yeah.
So of the 3 actions that you would take, short, buy, or do nothing,
Yeah.
what was the distribution of those 3 actions for each like time segment?
Good question. So you would imagine that sort of you need enough oscillation to happen, otherwise I won't make a problem.
Yeah.
So there is enough oscillation, and it has to be balanced because, so I would say, if I were to sort of, for sure it was sort of roughly even in terms of going up and down, how many times I crisscrossed. Otherwise sort of, because my sort of difference is bounded at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Precisely how many things, I don't know, I don't remember. I didn't calculate it.
Yeah. So the shorts equaled the buys, but would the do nothings be like 1% of the actions or 90% of the actions?
It won't be 90%, and it, for sure, it can't, none of them will be more than 50%, let's put it this way.
Yeah.
By design, because sort of, if you have only sort of few states, you just can't sort of. Yep.
Wait, what were the particular X features that you picked?
Seriously, that can be.
What were the particular X features that you picked for each time step?
We took only the time series of price variation or price of length 30 minutes, 60 minutes, and 120 minutes. Those were my X's. But if I have like a long history, I can chop off in many by sliding window. I can create lots of 30 minutes, lots of 60 minutes, and lots of 120 minutes. So those were my X's basically.
Like the returns across these intervals?
No, it's just actual time series. It's like sort of, if I think of them as quantized at 10 seconds, it's some vector in high dimension.
Okay.
Yeah.
So each 10-second period, you saw that you had one data point.
That is correct.
How did you generate that one data point?
Uh,
So you have the whole order book during that 10-second interval. Is it a traded price during that period, or is it weighted
Good.
volume?
Good. So sort of it's basically sort of transactions that are happening.
Okay.
So-
So only traded.
Yeah. So correct. So in between, if there is nothing is happening, I will just sort of interpolate it between this point and the next one, and then I'll take the interpolation point. Should find it.
Well, I mean, yeah, because you could easily do it another way and only be looking at book depth instead of, but this is, I just want to.
Yes, please.
You said that you had small positions earlier on. Does that mean that you were already holding a Bitcoin, you didn't have the option to buy another?
Yeah.
Or it's just that every day you're choosing to buy, sell, or hold one Bitcoin?
No. So at any point of time,
Yeah.
I will either hold a Bitcoin, I'll be shorting one, or I will have nothing. So my position is very simple.
Right.
I cannot accumulate my position, or I cannot sort of continue short.
And then for like closing out your position, do you just close out on the last day and then assume like profits loss and stuff?
Yeah, I don't think it sort of mattered at that because
Okay.
given the sort of it's actually sort of a small thing. Good question.
So just kind of a practical question. You saw that you realized a large return based on your research. Did this go into practice? And if not, why not?
Okay, so there's sort of there's two types of practice. One is to actually go and actually start doing stuff. So well, I've not done that yet. Okay. One thing to realize is that, as I sort of clearly mentioned, this strategy is not going to scale. It might get me my money for my coffee, but if one wants to scale it, so one has to sort of figure out a little more than what I just took. And my interest here was purely academic.
Yeah.
Now, as far as what's beyond this that we are doing, But I think there is this style of prediction using, it's a very simple algorithm to utilize. And it does deserve the question that can it actually happen? Can it sort of actually run in real time? See, if you look at this kind of computation, it scales linearly with number of data points. If you have lots of data points, you can compute this in parallel, but that will sort of, you end up spending a lot of time. Because if you want to sort of run this in real time, you really need sophisticated infrastructure. What we're doing right now is we're building in that sophisticated infrastructure, if I may say so. Yes, please.
Day traders, which I'm not firsthand familiar with, but secondhand, have a library of methods, magic potions of various sorts. Is this a strategy for classifying those or ranking them in some objective way?
So good at the slide for that. If there's a notion of technical trading, okay, and the notion of technical trading is that you look at the price pattern and they say, aha, that's going to be head and shoulder. So if it's head and shoulder and I have seen, let's say, so much, I know it's going to go up at this point. If it's going to go up, maybe I should do something. Right? Or you can sort of say, well, maybe it looks something like this, which is called triangle. These are all terms out there in literature. Now, these are the patterns actually that it turn out to be something that sort of as an explanation of our algorithm, we could pull it out from data, and that turned out to be very similar to what people have already observed empirically or whatever you call it in literature. So connecting back to your question, I would say one way to think of this method is that if you believe in technical trading, don't rely on your eyes, just use this. Yes, please.
Why do you think Bitcoin prices was an interesting thing to use this to extract information from?
Say that again, please.
Why Bitcoin prices versus any other sort of data you could predict off of?
Okay, so a few years back, we actually started with this. A few years back, we were using the same method to predict whether a topic would become viral on Twitter. And some point when I was giving the talk about that in our department here in computer science, somebody said, well, if you really believe that your method can work, go make money. And I took it to heart. That's well, I don't want to really make, maybe I want to make money, maybe I don't want. That's a separate thing, but the point is sort of, point well taken. Maybe Twitter is fundamentally predictable, and so sure, my method or any other method would work. Maybe sort of, I should go and sort of play with the big boys and sort of find out if I can sort of do some prediction. Now, then the next question is that, well, my first reaction was go and sort of scrape data from one of those Yahoo exchanges. Problem there is that sort of the data that you get if you have played with it is at far and apart sort of time interval where sort of already whatever information is there, somebody out there has already swept it away. It's really not fair comparison for. And to get real sort of data from in real time, I had to pay a lot of money that sort of didn't want to do. And so that's why sort of Bitcoin turned out to be the unique choice, because A, is large enough volume, B, is it was reasonably well traded. If you sort of plot the sort of let's say if you plot the frequency component of your time stage, you'll find it. So, does that answer your question? Yes.
Do you have the intention of retraining your model, given that now there's more historical data and maybe we've seen some reduction in volatility from the days that you were studying?
Yeah, so this is something we've published in Hands Figure. So what we found is that sort of course, since, as I mentioned, we've been continuously working on that. What we find is that sort of, not these but other things, and sort of you can sort of do, the way we trained it is we trained for some months and then we used it fixed. But you can sort of constantly keep training yourself. And there are variations of this, natural variations, and that sort of results into 3x performance better. That's just not by without tuning, just a little bit cleverer. So there's a value to that.
Would you consider extending then the time windows beyond 30, 60, 120 minutes if you've had additional data?
That helps a lot. And 30, 60, and 120 we did it just a number, just a hunch that sort of this is roughly the time scale at which things change. But actually, the 10 minutes and 45 minutes and 180 minutes is a better bet. Turns out. Yep.
Do you know if there's an intelligent way for choosing these window sizes?
Yeah. Cross-validate.
Yeah, sure.
But
But
that's
that's,
constantly keep changing it. And you can constantly keep cross-validating.
Well, one suggestion for that would be that it's relative to the volatility of the market, so it could be based upon time of day or just
Sure.
trading volume, anything like that is a more intelligent.
So you can sort of make a meta method out of this. Saying so if recent history looks like this, and we sort of, now you can sort of do the same thing with the parameters, right? The parameters of the algorithm, you can also make them a function of sort of your recent time series. But you can sort of keep building layers on top of that if you want to think of it. I haven't done those things. Any other question? Well, thanks for your attention.
So you get out of here, right?
Yes.
And, you know, if anyone wants to stick around for a general Bitcoin conversation, I know many people are here, not because of Bitcoin, but because of Professor Shah's speech. So we're happy to introduce people more to Bitcoin if you're